Hello and welcome to episode 192 of Michael and Ivanka's Grand Podcast. A weekly podcast where we figure out what we think about just about everything, and in true form, Ivanka has shifted across to the side a bit somehow since we started recording. Always trying to get these cameras the same and sort of look in the same colours, but because I'm a ghost, I just always look sort of ill next to Ivanka's face. This week, my name's Michael Forrest.
And I'm Ivanka Majic, and I am radiant.
She's radiant. So we've both got our faces on camera, but you can only see that if you either watch the video through Patreon or you join us live on Twitch, which is now an hour earlier each week because we're recording 2 podcasts, so we needed to make some extra time because one is not enough. One is just not enough. So this week we're going to talk about. It's a fairly professionally businessy, nerdy sounding topic, which is minimum viable products. And the reason I wanted to talk about it was because I've had to unlearn some bad habits. So I've been making little prototypes and products for people for let's say decades now, shall we?
Yeah,
certainly years and years. But they tend to be for these sort of like fancy clients with brands and things. And then so really. And a minimum viable product, we will say MVP, is just like what is the most basic version of a tool or a piece of software or some content or whatever it is that will kind of validate it, that people can see and find useful. So that's what that is. Ivanka has done some stuff on this as well. Ubuntu Phone.
Ubuntu Phone, various projects that lots of people talk about MVPs, and they are very different, even from like coaching people into how to run a workshop, for example. They'll go, I just need the MVP for this workshop, and then so it's like this kind of like a test version, but people use it to mean slightly different things in different circumstances, I believe. And there are different ways to make it useful, because I think it's still a tool. It's above all else, it's a tool, and if you don't use it appropriately, then like any tool, it doesn't do the right job. So and there's stuff I have to say out of nowhere.
Good. And just that, like that thing of when you build something, there's the first bit of effort to get something that sort of just about works. You sort of have to do that 2 or 3 more times to get something that's polished enough, that's clear enough that you can actually like stick it in the app store, right? As a kind of posh looking product. So there we go. That is what we're going to be talking about. Hopefully someone will be interested in this. Okay, titles. How's it going, Ivanka? What's the best thing that happened to you last week, if anything?
I made it. Did I tell you? Did I tell you last week that I was in the our beach cleanup? Made it into some national papers.
You may have
papers. Maybe I told you generally. So it's not an actual newspaper, but a very popular news portal. Right. Because we did this beach clean 2 Saturdays ago, but I got Nick to come along with his fancy camera. Because, it's all about the marketing. So we've got some lovely pictures of it, and therefore managed to spark some conversation. So we're doing another beach clean tomorrow with our Cleaning Teddy Bears crew. So I'm excited about that mostly, I'd say. Yes, that's it. Oh, yeah, no, I'm not going to tell you
beach cleanup. Oh, we're going to just start teaser non-story. Sorry. So you've got some press. What are you doing with your photos?
Well, we've allowed the cleaning bears. I think you could draw a reasonable analogy to like Extinction Rebellion in some ways. Like it's not a centrally organised thing. Anybody can declare themselves to be some cleaning bears, which we have done. But we have made our folder of photos available to all cleaning bears. Right. Their promotional material. So we've contributed in that way, and which is something I have to say that I remember I'm sure I've said this before, but like I remember talking to one of the women in Brighton who runs the rough sleeper social care stuff, and she said, I've got so many do-gooders. Everyone wants to make cups of tea and hand out duvets, but what I really need is people to help me raise money. And sometimes contributing one's professional skills for volunteer situations is kind of more value than doing the thing. But in this case, I am happy to be picking up the rubbish as well as generally being noisy about it. And so, because I find the picking up rubbish very therapeutic. It's like, just adding order easily and physically. I have control. I can pick up a piece of rubbish and I can put it in a bag and it is done. And so I find it quite healthy.
I did that with folding my socks yesterday. I was really focused on the socks.
Similar thing. I have to say it's a similar thing. I bought some drawer organisers for my daughter's drawers.
Drawer organisers.
Because I have to say, I keep her, since she's been born, I've kept her clothes far more orderly than mine. I've ever kept mine, and it's quite nice. But there's chaos in her clothes drawers, so I've now created order where there was chaos. This is the theme of the week.
There we go.
How are you, Michael? Order.
How am I? I'm week 2 into I'm not allowing myself to write any code, even though I've still written some code. It's very hard to avoid sometimes. Just like I just need this not to crash when I send out this video or blog post or something. So there's been some little tinkers, but I have been talking to developers and meeting people, and sort of doing some sort of getting that rolling. But the best thing I did last week was I just made this. I'd made this like little tool for just calculating your mic delay. So like on stream, it can be a bit annoying to calculate your mic delay. It was just this tiny little thing that I'd sort of just about kludged together. But last year I was like, well, it needs another stage of design. It needs to be tidied up and neatened up, and you can't just. And then because I wasn't allowed to work on it, but I was like, well, this is still useful, so I'll make a video about how to use it, and then just tell people and just be that Microsoft guy, be that guy that says, no, you have to do it the right way or it will just not work. And I finally I put that video out. I posted it in a few places, and it's my mailing list is growing at last. I'm starting to get like emails every multiple email sign-ups a day. So I just did the right level of bullying people into signing up for my mailing list, and something that's genuinely quite useful, even if it's unpolished. And I'm getting people. I'm doing user acquisition that I've been trying to do for the last 4 months, and I actually found something that worked, and it just like relied on me not allowing myself to make it look any better, because I'm not allowed to work on that. It's fine. Yeah. It's fine, Michael. It's fine. It's fine. Just chill. It's
so hard sometimes though to sort of go. I put out my first ever Instagram story yesterday. I just don't do it because I just on Instagram mostly use it just to look at. I've got quite a closed off Instagram account, but then I started this Croatian one a while ago where I'm trying to sort of to be a bit more like, hey, come and knit, hey, pick up rubbish. Anyway, but in order to do that, you actually need to actively promote it. So I was like, I need to do these Instagram stories. So I did a thing. I put music on it. I put animated GIFs on it. It was like somebody had vomited all the functionality from the Instagram stories onto mine. I was kind of like, look at this. So I was like, because Nick goes, oh, so many Croats use music in their Instagram stories, which so anyway, so I put some music on, and then I said to one of my cousins, I was like, what is it with the music? She goes, for ages the licensing wasn't sorted out, so they couldn't do music on their Instagram story. Anyway, so it looks awful, but I just thought, I sod it, I'll just post it. See if anybody got some hearts and some laughs.
Yeah, like one of my biggest ones was like such a throwaway. Like I just moved my camera around what I'd done, and like that was the one that that's a reel. That's not a story. But anyway, so my best thing that happened last week is quite closely related to the subject of this week's episode, because I'm like, I learnt something this week. I want to talk about it some more, because I think that could be fun. So why don't we, I'll show you a bit of Christmas in Milan. And oh my God, look at my saturation on my face now.
Natale.
Like, first thing in the morning is such a such a hard time. Like if I don't just like shut all the blinds and shine my own lights on myself, like the light is changing just constantly. So yeah, that's a high quality video you can pay for.
Yeah.
So there we go. Ivanka and I have just had a behind-the-scenes discussion on the visuals that were associated with what you just heard. Right, MVPs, minimum viable. What does viable mean? What does minimum mean? Like the big thing I learned was I just noticed that I have a bad habit of that I've garnered from years of working for clients, where it's not quite the raw situation of they say MVP, but they don't really want an MVP. They want an MVP that takes twice as long, because you've got to polish it up a little bit, because they've got to sort of maintain their brand to some extent. And that's given me like this habit of basically not wanting to put anything out there if I've to validate that people want it. The whole idea is to validate that someone's going to want it, and then you polish it up a bit. So your early users will deal with a bit of jank, and then you'll be like, oh, right, this is actually something people will jump through some hoops just to sort of use, because it's a really good solution, sort of underlying solution. But I've been in this habit, because for years I've been trained this way as a programmer, to like, if I find a bug, if I know that something's not quite right with it, either visually the layout is a bit like suboptimal, or like I know that if you try and upload a second video to this thing, it's just not going to work again, and you've got to refresh the page, and I don't want to force a user to refresh the page to use my product because I'm not Microsoft. I don't do that. It's like but what I realized was by just jumping in and by just being forced essentially to put something out that hadn't had that sort of final stage of polish, people were just as happy to use it and share it and talk about it. And I've already seen it like shared on blog posts and on Facebook in different posts and things like that. And it's like, okay, so that means I don't have to do that 200% extra effort before I've just made sure that people want something. And I think that's something that I think brands and companies could learn from as well, because we are in this habit of trying to make everything super slick. If it crashes, if it's a bit wonky, if you have to like know exactly what to do, if it takes a video to explain how to use it, that's fine for the first stage.
It depends though. Like,
right, okay.
Yes, so there's like a minimum useful product, or a minimum viable doesn't just mean that the product runs. It means that you've got the money and the time to make it. It's like viable can be, I'm not allowed to write code. What can I do in a week? And I've got a week. You know, it's not that the viable bit isn't just about the product itself. It's could be about testing something back office in an office environment. Like, do we have the administrative support to deliver this experience? Do we have the so it could be something back. It could be, do we have the money? Does the technology actually let us do this? It's the minute. This is why I think there's something about the minimum viable product that people need to stop and think about what it is they're testing and what it is you're trying to discover. And that's what, that's in my head what I mean by a tool. It's like a minimum viable product is a tool to test something out. Could be market, could be your team, could be technology, could be anything. And unless you're clear what it is you're trying to find out, could be that you need investment. And if you need investment, you might spend more time on polish and strip out a few types of functionality or something. Do you know what I mean? Like, make it so it's that definition of it matters in my head.
So you have to know what the such a different
What's
perspective
the
to mine, so
point?
that's good, right? That's such a, like, because I'm obviously in this world of like, I have an idea, my first instinct is just to build it and try it out, and then and then I always get into this it's taking 6 weeks, I just wanted to try something out. Like, I always have this cycle I've noticed in the last few months. I shouldn't have jumped into this. It's taking so long. So, but that's fairly specific to like the indie hacker type mindset, which you have to like. That's what I'm trying to control. But yeah, like what you're saying is there's so many different sort of types of MVP that I'm not even talking about
There
here. So
really
like,
are, yeah. Like, I mean,
yeah,
we mentioned the Ubuntu phone as an
yeah,
example of an MVP. So the Ubuntu phone was put together. We knew we had to get a demo together for a big show. It's like, right, we're going to sit in stands at that big consumer electronics show in Vegas, and for that we need to be able to show people something that works. Okay, what story are we going to try and tell? And at the same time, a Canonical wasn't big enough nor had the resources enough to sort of like build a whole thing. Like, you know, how much there's a conversation about how much code you want to throw away. So there was this kind of
well,
like enabling the hardware stack balanced against, because we didn't want to fake things. So we wanted to actually send an SMS in front of people. We wanted to actually take a photo in front of people, but we chose three very, very narrow scenarios. Like, you had to sort of like hey, this is the Ubuntu phone, you can take a picture and you can send it to your friend that you found in your contacts, la la la. And so there's a story designed, and then we looked at how do we build the story. And because everybody knew what the story was, the tech, the design, everybody was on board with trying to make that story real. So it wasn't a full blown phone operating system,
yeah.
but it did do three or four things really well. And it did have polish and the pixels were in the right place and it didn't crash and la la la. But in terms of all the things a phone needs to do, it only did a few of them. Do you know what I mean? So it's
Yeah,
like,
yeah, no, absolutely, and yeah, having it story driven, which is something that I clicked 10 years ago, but I still am not doing a very good job of executing on it. And I think like just the word viable, viable doesn't like. I think I was in this mindset of, well, it has to be viable. It has to explain itself. It has to have onboarding. Sort of within the software in isolation from any other context has to be viable. But actually, if you start from the story, if you say, okay, well, we're actually going to guide people through a stand, or I'm going to make a video explaining how to do this, it's like that surrounding, like, you can sacrifice some quality of implementation in order, or depth of implementation or number of
depth,
features,
or breadth.
if
Yeah.
because the viability is supported by that, the stand, the booth, the story you're telling, the features that work. And the same with me, like doing a video, it's like, okay, well, it's viable because there's a video explaining how to use it, rather than because I put an extra 3 weeks into like an onboarding sequence that still probably doesn't really help people that don't know what they're, it still kind of misses that, a lot of that human aspect to understanding something and knowing if it's worthwhile for you. And people, like software, there's no sort of perfectly accessible piece of software, perfectly intuitive piece of software. Not even Apple's products are remotely intuitive, but they just have extremely high TV advertising budgets, so they can show you what's happening on the screen, and like they're basically tutorials, with a huge marketing budget. So I've been in this mindset of it has to be totally intuitive and explain itself. No, I just need to make a video and it needs to just about work, and that's cool.
It is the just about. I mean, I think with like user research findings and stuff, you end up having this conversation sometimes where it's like, this trips users up. It does trip them up, and it would be great if we could fix it. But is it as important as this other thing? Or because your minimum viable product thing as well might be about, we need to make some money to pay for the next bit. And so like, okay, that then the focus is making something, because you can sometimes make a product that in its smallest iteration has value that people will give money for, and then you can use that money to add more value to it. Or it could be that you want to save people the bother of some part of a job. Like I think in the government things, like with the digital marketplace, we knew that applying to be on the framework, to be part of this digital marketplace where people can supply to government, filling in the form, applying, all of that stuff was really arduous. So it's like that's the bit that we've focused the energy on to start with, rather than the helping the people the other side find what they wanted to buy. Do you know? So there's not like there isn't one version. That's my thing, and it's very easy to get caught up in the bit you want to do as well,
or the bit that you're an expert in as well. Like,
yeah,
okay, I know I've done this 20 times, so I've just got to do this, what I always do. But no, there's a wider context to all of this. So yeah, like, why don't we have break 2? And
yeah, do it. We gone a bit stale.
So, well, sorry, I just surprised Ivanka by switching away from the thing. Are we audible? It says muted. Okay, no, it's fine. Sorry. There was a window display in Milan. It's the bread shop, the bagel shop, the shop that the family loves to get nice breads and things from. So here's something I noticed yesterday, though. So So as I've mentioned on this podcast, I've ended up in the process of like making YouTube videos, editing this podcast. I've got some little like tools that I've made for myself. So I've got a thing that lets me write a script in the sort of industry standard tool and turn that into a Final Cut Pro timeline, so that with a load of things that which has got all the script as captions in there, and I can dump in videos, and it just tells me what I need to fill in, and then I sort of paint it all through with different video clips, and I've got a video, and then I've got another thing that I've made for the podcast where because it's a bit annoying, well, I make notes at what time, and like if I'm like, oh, Ivanka just coughed or something, back when I used to edit it to death, I put the time code in, and then I made a thing that let me sort of put the Final Cut timeline through this tool, and then it gave me the markers or the edit points, which was quite important, because if you start pulling stuff out of the early part of the episode, then now all of your time codes are off in the in the list of things, and it's like I've got to now look for these things, blah blah blah. Anyway, I was like, okay, well, I've got the thing that makes the timeline. I've got actually a version of that on my website that sort of works. So let me like tell people about that, and then. Okay. But then I was like, no, then I start like looking at my video and writing a script and going, no, this needs to be a video about like, I'm calling it like supersonic video production process kind of thing, like how I go from script to a finished video in sort of ultra fast, by automating all the difficult bits and just thinking about the content, which I think would be. And then I'm sort of writing all these bullet points, and I'm realizing, oh no, I don't want to just say this one tool. I want to be able to say, and then here's this tool, and then here's this tool, which then means I've got two tools that I haven't finished making that I need to finish before I can release this video, which would actually, because it's actually like, it's not the tool doesn't make sense unless you know the surrounding process, unless you know the mindset, unless you know all of those things. And so I've sort of like found myself in a bit of an awkward corner where it's like, well, can I make this video until I finish the code? And I'm seeing that old habit of like, it's almost like this procrastination of like, because it's hard to write a script, and it's hard to sort of, okay, right, I've got to get on camera now, I'm going to read through this thing, I've got a teleprompter, blah, 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 like record the voiceover, whatever it's going to be. And it's easy to look at my tool and go, no, I just need to spend a little bit of time. Sorry for the beeping outside my window. I try and mute it when I can, but when I'm talking, I cannot. There is still very much a lot of construction work going on outside. In terms of minimum, like, what's my point? My point is sometimes once you start trying to contextualize something, sometimes once you start writing, if you write the story too late, I suppose, or if you, there can be quite a lot of consequences to that. Like, there's some nooks and crannies of that story that can be very difficult to get right sometimes, and can end up meaning, oh, I just want to like share what I've done, but actually I can't because there's all these little things. And I think that probably does apply to the phone and to anything really.
Yeah, I think it, but that coming up with the story first enable the story that was built was not the story we set out to build exactly, because we could make decisions along the way to go, we're not going to be able to do that bit. What can we do instead, or how can we drop that bit and still be smooth? And so but it's that intention element that is really, Nick talks about this in marketing. He always goes, start with the end in mind. And I go, why don't you stick? But it's that there is this difference, I think, between, so when you say, oh, I can just build a thing, I can't do that. And so that's not an option for me as a way of trying something out. So I have to think of a different way of bringing the thing to life to test its validity or its viableness. Do you know what I mean? Like I wouldn't be able to knock together software. So therefore I'll look for different ways of trying to make it real. And it's that story that I've talked about before, that guy, that the Kodak camera guy, who
worked on the tech,
Eastman.
and then
he worked on the tech
Eastman.
And then turned it into a product. And it's like, it depends what your strength is. Like if you're a graphic designer, you might spend ages working on the branding, some time on the story, and then and maybe the interaction screens, but actually have no idea how to implement them. So you're much more likely to make an animation or a video than you are to write some code. And I remember years ago being in a conversation, we were talking about prototyping and sketching. It's like, if you can code faster than you can draw, do you sketch in code? So what? But if that's hard for you, it's like even upstairs we're doing our loft, and Nick and I were talking about the kitchen, and because he's got some screws and some wood, we literally laid out a kitchen, because it only took 10 minutes, and it was like a nice 3D way of sketching out what we were trying to do. But we didn't have to go and buy anything, get anything. So it's all of those things that make the viable product conversation, I think, really they change it.
Yeah. And so actually, I part of this whole exercise for me is to sort of, there's limits to that. It's just quicker to build it, like thinking, because you always think you always sort of overestimate how quickly you can build it. Like, even, freaking 35 years into my experience as a programmer, it's like I cannot help but underestimate how much time something is going to take, and it's a source of great frustration. So I'm trying to build some habits around, force myself to make an animation, make a video, or actually yesterday, like I was like, I need this thing, but right, instead of just jumping into the code, because I've got another developer looking at this repo now. So on GitHub, so GitHub is where developers share code. A repo is the code that goes into the website, and then you can create issues against the. I'm obviously explaining this to you, Ivanka, because you obviously don't know what a repo is. No, I'm telling Annette. Telling my auntie. So there's a platform for collaborating on. So I was like, well, there's someone looking at this. Why don't I write up what I want doing, and then disappear into a black camera? Yeah, I know, it turns off every half hour. This bloody cannon. This is the magic lantern downfall. This is the problem of using a DSLR for a webcam. So I wrote up. I decided to write it up as a task to do on the shared repository, but then there was very much this thing of, I had to still go into the code and remind myself where everything was and what needed to be done, and okay, here's how it looked in the version I made for the desktop, and here's what the website code looks like, and it's a different programming language, and here's this bit, and I still haven't been very thorough about linking to the right things and the thing, and it's like definitely would have but this is all work, so it's like most of the work that I would have had to do to fix it myself was the same work to write the issue on GitHub. And then I've woken up this morning going, I reckon about 5 minutes I could have this done, rather than sort of going through a sequence of calls with someone who's going to be in a worse position to test it because they don't have like my script writing software or Final Cut or really know what my expectations are, blah blah blah. But the trade-off of that is, yeah, I can just throw it together in 5 minutes and do a sort of quick and just make it work. But if someone else does it, the trade-off there is that they can do a really good job on it in a way that I can't on my own. So,
well, I also think that there's a trade-off in that if you continue to do things on your own, you don't, just because you can, not you, we all do it, then you miss out on possibly finding new people to collaborate with, or like you say, people doing a better job. But it's like, you can't scale. There's only so far you can scale yourself. So, sort of like taking the time to write things down and sharing it is one way of doing that, I think.
Yeah, but definitely the trade-off there in terms of sort of quality of it's sort of like for the MVP, I don't need a high quality implementation. It's like, well, what can I do on maybe I should be focusing more on, okay, here's what I can do on my own, and then once that's validated and maybe there's interest and I've got a list of people that want to use it and blah blah blah, I've then got something I can take to a collaborator and say, look, do you want to help me with this, or investor or XYZ, right? So it's almost like the collaboration bit is difficult unless there's sort of a meaty enough. But then I don't know, like, just you always do worry that it's going to take someone a week to do something, and you're just like, I just want to get this out and test it as quickly as possible. So
it's the taking the time to explain to somebody what you want. I find as well, like what you really mean is just so hard.
It's hard. Yeah, and you say taking the time. It's like you take the time, and then you have to take the time again the next week, and then you have to take the time again the next week and try and get it through to them. It's like,
but I think some of it's really hard is down to the fact that I haven't actually thought it through.
Well, that's
and when I'm writing it down, it's like, oh, actually, is that really what I mean? Whereas, if you're doing it yourself, you kind of tinker and change your mind as you go along.
Doing it, you learn by doing it as well. You figure out what you want by doing it, and that's just very, very hard to collaborate on. We put a break in, even though we just had a forced break when my network went down. I'm going to put the last break in, and we'll just have a think.
So one of the things about MVPs that maybe we haven't talked about is whether the audience for your MVP is the same one as will be for your product. So, if you think about like your delay calculator thing, it's like I have no need for one. I don't want one. I don't know why I'd want one, but there are people for whom this is a problem. And and if it's a problem, they might be willing to try out some sort of tool just to solve their problem. And then later on, they can help the rest of us understand why it's a problem. But we're going to be much less tolerant of all the, the hoops and the kind of special refreshes and knocks on wood and turn around and touch the ground sort of workarounds that you need to do to use that first version of the software. So I think that's quite and again, it might be a type of user, your first audience, or it might be just someone with loads of money that you want you to give you loads of money.
And that's something the reason I'm so happy with this particular thing, this little delay calculator, it is my shoot camera feed user.
Right.
Like that
The
it's
same
exactly the thing, and it's the perfect lead magnet. And so there's this whole there's no point like a track. So I've got like a mailing list of people that signed up because they wanted to track their happiness. I cannot use that to market my camera app
No.
because they're not going to be
No.
interested. Whereas the people that have signed up to my product, that just this my little tool that lets you calculate the delay on their cameras on their feet, it's like, yes, you are going to probably want my app. So that's like an art in itself. But what I was gonna, but then. And something else, just to be a little bit chaotic here, something else that you just reminded me of. This morning I was listening to this guy who I'm going to talk about him again, I'm sure, but this week we'll just say a guy who wrote the mom test. But he was talking about Amazon reviews and how so he's written this book, and it's like it's quite a short. It's a book about like I don't know, validating your whatever, like stuff I'm talking about. But he was talking about book reviews and the sharing thing, and how he's got like a couple of like curmudgeon-y reviews from Brits saying this was £20 and it only had like 120 pages, and he's sort of saying there's this thing that happens on Amazon where if it's a good book, the first reviews to start off with it will be like 5 stars, and because it's going through this word of mouth recommendation thing, and people that get recommended it's because it's a solution to the problem, the exact problem they're having. But as it gets like more and more successful, it starts getting people start hearing about it or like reading it, but they don't have that problem, and then that sort of starts to bring the ratings down because sort of inevitably as a matter of course, because now the person who has the problem wants it in as concise a form as possible, and that's going to be a huge help to them. Whereas if they don't really have the problem, then they're just like, this is a bit of a short book, what's the point of that?
Problem. Yeah. Why is this a problem? You've got to like convince them that it's a problem and then give them the solution. Yeah.
So, but his thing is like if you start your book from like this is where people are at in order that they have this problem, and I'll just start from there and give them the tips. Whereas if you're sort of targeting that more broad audience that like sort of trying to get that like long tail, then you do have to have the book twice as long in order that it explains all the context. But that is something that is done, the context of the useful thing. So that's like, a short book or a simple tool. It's in that case, it's the word of mouth, and someone says, oh, you probably need this. And that's what's providing the context. But if your context is just like the cover and some Amazon reviews, even like, then you don't have enough to understand what it is. And then it is no longer viable kind of thing. If that ties it back into the theme.
I think so.
Products. You can see that I'm just obsessed with this stuff because I'm trying to. I actually had a good week of app sales last week, but I'm not. Like, knock wood, if it kept up like this, I would be able to relax a little bit more. But I just feel like this is all stuff I'm having to learn, and but I think this MVP conversation is just something like. I think like a repeated source of frustration for me is just like I'm spending too long on something that I didn't want to spend this long on. And even though yesterday I made a video about Done Good, and I was like, wow, it really tries to take you through it all. So the video is almost me just following the instructions on the in the app. So I could have just saved myself 6 weeks of redesigning and reworking this thing and made a video explaining how to use it in its current form, and then I wouldn't have been like crying for like 4 weeks of that.
Your delay calculator. So could you turn that into a product as well?
I think some of these things are lead magnets. Some of these things are, because what I kind of want to do is get Squares TV to be like a subscription thing where you pay for access to some sort of toolkit or like set of things. Like you go, okay, I want my streaming toolkit, I want my Final Cut editing toolkit. You pay some sort of low monthly subscription, and then you can sort of have access to these tools that you may that you're going to be using regularly. That's kind of my hope for it. But the good thing, and so it's like so what I wonder is like, can I convert a janky free product that's done to get email addresses into a polished paid product? Or are people going to be like, I was fine with the janky free product, and there's actually no need. I don't have a need for a fancier version of this. Have I then wasted a lot of time polishing up that MVP into something that feels more commercial to me, only to discover that Like, it's that thing. It's
Right.
like you can validate that someone says they would pay for something, but you actually have to need to validate if they're going to actually click buy now, and then you know that they were actually ready to pay for something. So it sort of goes back to your point of like, is it the right audience? Is it actually, are these the right people? Am I? Yeah, whatever you said, however you said it, I forget.
I said it really eloquently, I'm sure.
Yeah.
What does
I'm
janky
sure.
mean, Michael? You've used it twice, and it's
What
a
does
word
what mean?
that janky.
Janky. Just
I've
don't
never
people know
used
what that
janky.
words mean? Janky just
don't
means
know.
like
I
it's a
wasn't
bit
sure.
misaligned and a bit ugly and a bit awkward, and it shows you like it's basically Microsoft Windows is janky. And just to a probably similar extent, so is Ubuntu. Like you just the edges.
What?
Like an error message. It sort of shows you error code -4163 user error. You know, stuff like that. That just you're like, this is not polished. This is not nice. You know,
That
all
was
the
one thing that was
yeah.
making me regret my platform change decision yesterday. I had 2 error messages that were just like, you can't do that. Oh, yeah. What?
Yeah, you're not. So yeah, a bit of
So, yeah.
sort of it's sort of the computer expressing its natural sensibilities at the user because the developer hasn't had time to like protect the user from them. But you know, in terms of pros, it would just be like spelling mistakes. I don't know.
Yeah.
So there we go. Have you got any more?
Book.
Yeah. But then, this
yeah.
allegedly, or you know, this apparently like also applies to books. Like if you haven't like checked that people are interested in it with the first drafts, and then you spend all this time paying for editors and doing more revisions, and then you realise that it wasn't really the right book, then you've wasted all of that polished time, and that's ultimately the point of this MVP thing.
Yeah. But then there's some things that there's a reputation element we haven't spoken about at all,
Right.
which is, I think, which I've forgotten. I sort of remembered it when you spoke about the sort of pixel perfect element of it.
Yeah.
I think there's a personal MVP element that's important, as like me, like personal or brand. Like if I put out something that's got spelling mistakes in it, that reflects on my professional reputation. Or if I put something out that but then I'm quite happy to natter away with you every Friday on a podcast.
But we've had a lot of practice. We've had a lot of
like,
practice of this now. Like we're pretty good at this now. So like I don't think I think if we'd done those early episodes like this, your brand may have been impacted. But I think the solution to all of this, right, is just that's what the whole beta badge is for, right? Alpha badge. So I need to just like. I don't think I even have one for Square. I just need to make sure I've always got one to hand that I can slap on whatever I'm doing and just say, look, this is beta. And this is how the big brands avoid the reputational hit. This is how Gmail was in beta for how long, you know?
Yeah. I think we haven't mentioned alpha beta, but government projects, that digital marketplace putting out an alpha first, then a beta, may still be in beta for all I know. But it gives you an opportunity to go to sort of go, look, we need to put this out there. We need you using it, but we know it's not completely finished. Like we think we believe it has enough utility to be worth your time. We're not, because that's it as well. It's like there is literally throwing something at the wall and see if it'll stick, and then there is placing something carefully on the wall, knowing that it might wobble off. You know what I mean? There's that sort of like, you can't literally vomit stuff out at people and then hope that just see what works. It's the delivery. It goes back to the story. I think the intention of it. What am I trying to do with this, and why am I trying to do that? And then I can carry on and make some good decisions along the way, hopefully.
And watch out for where your skill level is sort of particularly deep, and that maybe you can be a little bit more shallow on that just to get to the first thing. And this there's also there's also this case of like Steam early access where you can sort of play games early, and there's a whole like discussions that happen around that, because a lot of developers will, like a lot of people will be like, actually, I'm not going to join the early access. I'm going to let other people do that, because a lot of developers started like putting a bit too much out in early access, and people were paying for it up front. and then like sort of having to play these broken games, and it was sort of like you can still take a reputational hit by like putting something out too early, but you know, at least people are, and also I think there's a case where you sort of want to test if this is actually enough, so you don't put the beta badge on it. You see, like, if I tell people this is finished, will they still pay for it? You know, like sometimes you do want to test that, but yeah, it's just your point, isn't it? You've got to figure out what you're trying to test, and experimental anything, you got to know what your outcome is, otherwise it's all a bit of a waste of time.
Totally. All right.
So yeah,
there
we go.
That's an MVP conversation.
Okay. Thanks for listening to that. That was you can go if you like if you like the podcast, go to grandpodcast.com. We're going to be having probably more conversations around this sort of thing on the new one, can you see my screen podcast.com. But for now, grandpodcast.com, come and all the links that we've talked about. If you support us on Patreon, you can get the full videos, and you'll get an email each week with all the links as well, and a link to the video, and that'll be like 3 days early. So there you go. Like that's the Patreon pitch. If you want to talk to us, hello@grandpodcast.com goes to both of us. Give us radical feedback. Where can people find you on the internet, Ivanka?
People can find me at Ivanka on Twitter.
You can find me at Michael Forrest on Twitter, and my main thing is squares.tv. Please come by. It's where I'm putting a lot of effort. And so with that, see you next time. We'll see you in 2 weeks because Ivanka is making some money.
Yes.
Very selfishly making a load of money instead of recording this podcast for free for our 2 Patreon supporters. So 3 Patreon supporters, sorry. I've still got this money from Annette. If you want to send us some money in an envelope, that's fine too. So yes, there we go. We will see you next time. So goodbye. Bye. 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 Bye.